So I found myself inspired by the idea that we were going to do jazz for Christmas Eve last night. As a couple of you were here and you got to hear it. Secret, I love jazz singing. I don't know, it's something about the chords and the dissonance, it really gets you right here. So I wanted to open by sharing with you the words of an old jazz song that I've had the pleasure of getting to sing this year. It's something I had to really learn, so the words are just right there in my heart. It goes like this. Now, out of the night, new as the dawn into the light, this child, innocent child, soft as a fawn, this child is born. One small heart, one pair of eyes, one work of art. Here, in my arms, here he lies, trusting and warm. Blessed, this morn, a child is born. So, Merry Christmas, everyone. Because you know what? I think that's the heart of Christmas. God's great. The universe is wide. And you know what? Life, it's packed with a lot of joy and a lot of struggle all bundled up together. Sometimes it's difficult to know which way is up and what way is winning there. And yet, tangled up in the middle of all that is this thread of love. It's a thread of love that runs so deep and is so abiding that it just couldn't help but jump right into the middle of all of this with us. It's a great love that's been handed straight into our own hands. Jesus is that love. Jesus is God with us. Jesus chose this path of love because you know what? Love means walking with. And Jesus chose to walk with us. Now, Jesus could have chosen any time, any place. Jesus is God, after all. So why a specific time? And why that particular time and place, you might ask? I mean, it wasn't an easy time or place to become a tiny, vulnerable little human. There was an empire that was keen to stay in control, that hauled families like Mary and Joseph's away from home, no matter the timing or the inconvenience of it all. But that's what Jesus chose. And it meant a lot to that family, to their people, to that time and place. It meant a lot that Jesus came as the prince who didn't choose a palace, but chose a stable. Now, Mary and Joseph, they were just ordinary people. Joseph was a craftsman, Mary his young bride. They are sometimes thought of as poor, but other scholars think they were more likely people that had, a home, a workshop. They were clearly settled in a village, and they probably were deeply rooted in their extended family. Yet they were also ordinary enough to be subject to the whims and the forces that were completely outside their control. Forces that would uproot them more than once, make them into refugees for a time. And it was into the arms of that family that Jesus came. I think that says a lot about that love that God has for us. You know what else tells us a lot about God's love for us? The lack of fanfare. I mean, both Mary and Joseph were given a heads up. They knew how precious this child was. But it's definitely clear that nobody else around them has any idea what's going on. You know how we know? Because, let's face it, if you knew that God was coming to visit your town, don't you think you'd find a room? There were all those descendants of the line of David, all gathered into Bethlehem. Lots of important people, I would guess. And yet, God decides to just slip in alongside of us. No need for lots of self-importance. That angel of the Lord and all its heavenly hosts, well, it actually chooses to appear to a group of shepherds. Now, I don't know if any of you have met shepherds before? Anyone? A few. I see someone shaking their head. They're not what you would consider the most civilized bunch, right? The ones that I knew were these scruffy, cheeky, preteen and early teen boys. They rarely bathe. And, they were a little all over the place. But they would jump at the chance to meet this child born as our Savior, just like those shepherds did a long time ago. That's the kind of welcome party that Jesus chose. So, why not today? Why not be born for us? Well, that's actually the great secret of Christmas, isn't it? Because God's great and the universe is wide, and yet Jesus chose to come into the ordinariness of human existence with only one true bit of fanfare. I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people, for everyone. That Christ child that was born then is still being born for us today. Jesus is here in our arms too, fragile, trusting, and warm, offering up that love for us and for our world as well. Now, this is not an easy time or place to become a tiny, vulnerable human either, is it? I mean, we've still got emperors out there acting like they're God, throwing their weight around with devastating effects. And whatever proclamations of love and peace that are breaking out in our existence, they are pretty easily overshadowed by the global reach of our modern megaphones and the uses that we foolishly put them to use with. But Jesus still chose this path of love because love means walking with us in this very ordinary and this very crazy time too. God's heart is here in all of the places that don't get the fanfare, shining just like the brightest of lights. This Christmas and every Christmas, God is born anew in us. So, what do we do with this good news of great joy? How on earth can we even begin to respond to this kind of gift? I think that's actually the real question that we need to answer for ourselves. Now, there's all sorts of answers because living and loving and forgiving and healing looks different for each and every one of us. And because Christmas comes every year, God's love is always coming into the world in new and fresh ways. But what about 2022? What's so special about this year that Jesus is choosing again to be here with us? How is that thread of love pulling on us to act now, today? Did any of you know? I know some of you do because some of you were here last night. But anybody who wasn't here last night, did any of you know that Oxford Dictionary allowed this year for the first time for the public to vote on what was going to be the word of the year. Anyone know that? You knew that. Do you know what the word of the year is?
God.
That's a good one. Actually, I really think that's a great choice, but that is not what people picked, unfortunately.
A bad word.
It wasn't quite a bad word. What'd they pick?
Gaslight?
Sorry?
I thought it was gaslight.
Ghastly. I don't think that was Oxford's. That might have been somebody.
Taxes.
different one.
Taxes.
No?
Taxes. That's a good one too.
Stock market.
Well, I bet this is one, I don't know, you're going to have to tell me if you've heard of this one. Because what the people that were polled by Oxford Dictionary picked as the word of the year, goblin mode. Anyone heard of it?
Nope.
Sounds like Harry Potter.
You've heard of it?
Heard it, I don't get it.
You don't get it. Well, good. I brought the definition.
Goblin mode.
Matthew and I quizzed our young adult kids, and they had.
Yeah.
But, you know, the rest of us need the definition. According to Oxford Dictionary, goblin mode is a type of behavior which is unapologetically self-indulgent, lazy, slovenly, or greedy, typically in a way that rejects social norms or expectations.
Sounds like my kids.
Except I think they were talking about adults. Right? Goblin mode.
I'm goblin.
It's pretty much the polar opposite of the kind of love that God and Jesus is showing us, right? And yet, you ask humanity, and that's the word that they think describes us this year. And then, you know, if we look around us, it's true that the world does seem a bit awash in goblin mode, don't you think? But a hip and flippant term like goblin mode, it also makes it really easy for us to look out there and to write that off as a whole bunch of people acting bad out there. So columnist Adam Sternberg challenges everyone, all of us, to look with eyes that are a little bit more honest about what's really going on with all of us. Because he called 2022 the year that we collectively lost it. That's because it's year 3. Some people are laughing. Yep, I think there's some truth in that, right? It's year 3. We're going through a lot. We've been going through a lot. And let's face it, we're not in that easy kind of, it's a crisis and we can all pull together kind of place anymore, are we? The change is still confusing and it's pretty chaotic. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of evidence of what exactly the world is heading towards, where we're going to get to through all of this yet. Hence, goblin mode. It's an expression of our uncertainty, our frustration, our anxiety, and all of that leaves us angry. It's an admission that our level of fear after 3 years of navigating so much ongoing change is, it's pretty potent for us. But instead of just wagging a finger at all of us, which would be easy to do, because, you know, columnists, sometimes they get to do that, right? It's sort of like being a preacher, only you don't have to talk. But this columnist, Sternberg, engages a lot of collective understanding instead. He says, hey, that anger, it's telling us something that we actually probably need to listen to about ourselves. It's telling us about all that we've been through, and that we need to exercise compassion and empathy. We need to exercise that towards ourselves and others, giving ourselves forgiveness, giving the world some forgiveness, so that we can start to breathe easier and then figure out a better path forward. Well, I've got news for you, because as our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, reminded us in his Christmas address, Jesus came to show us how to live. He showed us how to live reconciled with God and each other. And he taught us that the way to do that is God's way of love. It's our hope for our families, our communities, our societies. Indeed, it is our hope for the whole world. God is with us in our tiny, vulnerable humanness, in even our fear and our deepest anxieties and frustrations. One small heart, walking with all of that with us. Because of this, that allows us to choose too. It allows us to choose to pick up a thread of love and knit it into our own ordinary lives. We can walk out of here today renewed in our compassion for ourselves and for each other. We can walk out here into the world thinking of all the ways that we can be less goblin and more Christ. That is the heart of Christmas. Now, out of the night, into the light, this child is born, here in our arms. Blessed is this morn, a child is born. Merry Christmas to us all.